Well, welcome back to the channel. This is the last video in a series of videos that I've made about skid control, how to control a car at the point where you've lost grip with the road surface. And if you watch the previous videos, you'll have seen we've looked at how to control a skid under braking, how to control sort of wheel spin, skid under acceleration, and how to regain control of a car when it's understeering or pushing on in a corner. So in this video, we're going to look at oversteer. And this is, I suppose this is the most fun video to make for me, because this allows us to get the car sideways, throw it around a little bit, take advantage of the power and the rear wheel drive and stuff. But there's a serious element to this as well. Oversteer can catch you out very, very quickly if you're not ready for it. And one thing I want you to bear in mind on these videos is that I am setting the car up to skid. I'm doing it deliberately. And if you do it deliberately, you're ready for it and you're ready to put those inputs in any of these kind of skids that we're doing. But the real test of your skills is when it happens unexpectedly. Now, I've said before, your best option, your best skill that you can learn in skid control is not to get in the skid in the first place, and that's why I'm a big advocate of the advanced motoring organisations, the IAM and ROSPA, and the stuff that the emergency services teach, the stuff that I used to teach for the police and that I teach privately now. All this stuff is around keeping control of the car, keeping everything safe, and making sure that you don't get into these skids in the first place. But none of us is perfect. None of us is perfect, and we can all make these mistakes. So what do you do if things start to go wrong? That's what this series of videos is about. So what is oversteer? Well, again, the clue's in the name. The oversteer means the car is steering more than you want it to. Oversteer is when an oversteer skid sort of happens from the rear axle rather than the front axle. Understeer tends to be a skid on the front axle. Oversteer is when the car is sliding on the rear axle, and it's when the rear end almost feels like it wants to overtake the front end in a corner. So effectively what you will feel as a driver is you'll put some steering input in, and the car will suddenly rotate. It will yaw, if you want to use technical language, it will yaw more than the steering input that you've put in. And of course the danger then is that the result of an oversteer skid quite often, in fact in most circumstances, if somebody's not ready for it or if they don't know how to control it, is that it will result in a spin. It will result in the car rotating, and then if you're really unlucky, then going through a hedge, into a ditch, into a wall, or into a bus queue if you're having a really bad day. So how do we control that oversteer? How do we recognise it? Well, recognising it is fairly straightforward. All of a sudden the car will start to move sideways, and your natural reaction will be to start controlling that slide with the steering. You will put some counter steering on, but you'll see in a bit that actually the car will want to counter steer for you in certain circumstances. If you've got the gas in and the wheels are spinning, you can actually relax your grip on the steering wheel, and that corrective lock will come on naturally for you. I'll show you that in a little bit. But at the moment I've got the traction control and the stability control switched off, and I'm going to turn at this little turning area down here where it's quite slippery, and I'm going to be a little bit juicy with the accelerators, because it's that excessive speed and that excessive acceleration that will cause the oversteer in the first place. And then I'm not going to correct it, and I want you to see what happens. So if we go here, and I'm going to turn right, and we just spin. And we just completely spin out of control. So imagine that on the road. Imagine what a horrible feeling that will be. You've got your stomach's in here, you've been looking all around you, looking what direction you're going to go in, and you're completely out of control. So your first reaction, like I said before, is to put some corrective lock on. And your second reaction, your natural reaction, will be to lift off the gas. But you've got to be careful with that, because lifting off the gas can lift weight from the rear, and it can result in making the oversteer worse. So this time I'm going to steer, put some corrective lock on, I lift off the gas, and it rotates again. So that's you'll hear a lot of people talk about lift off oversteer, and that's it in action. So I'm turning the car, got some gas in, I lift off the gas, the weight transfers forward, and it actually you lose weight at the rear, so you lose more grip at the rear, and that's where the car's sliding anyway, and that spin just gets worse. It gets worse and worse, and it rotates. So this time I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm only doing this at low speed. I'm going to do the same thing, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply some corrective lock, and I'm just going to drive through it. The trick is not to lift fully off the gas. It's to keep a little bit of gas in and to drive the car through the slide. You know, your natural reaction when something's going wrong, especially when you're not expecting it, is suddenly just to lift off or even get on the brakes. And hopefully from that little demonstration you can see that that's the worst thing that you can do. And what we really want to do is just keep a bit of gas in, keep the rear wheels driving, and then counter steer so that we can get the car going back in the direction that we want it to go. And all we want to do here is turn right. And all the car's wanting to do is rotate. So we're going to counter that by driving it through. Watch what I mean. So we turn right now, back end comes round, slide, and then bring it to a stop. And you'll notice that what I've done is put a very quick bit of corrective lock on, but I'm then on the brakes. Once the car's straight and going in the direction I want it to do, I'm on the brakes. Let's do it again, that. Now just remember, it's not drift school, this. I'll show you a little bit of drifting in a bit, which is the fun bit of oversteer. This is controlling a car on the road in an emergency. I want you to imagine that this oversteer is coming in suddenly, unexpectedly. We weren't ready to lose that grip, and all I want to do then is avoid hitting anything. So as you know, the result of my actions is that the car comes to a controlled stop where we want it. So again, oversteer, corrective steering, and then come to a stop. And if we were going around a right-hand bend, then we've corrected that oversteer, we've got it back to a straight line, and once it's straight, I'm on the brakes and I'm bringing the car slowly down. Obviously, if the road continued down there, we'd just carry on driving. But one more demonstration of that. Remember, this is stability control off. This is a car without traction control, without stability control. The only thing that can control in the drive to the rear axle is me with my right foot. Turn in, car oversteers, corrective lock. The other thing to remember is as well with the corrective lock, this is a really important thing about oversteer, is that we are going round to the right, but I am steering left to correct it. I'm bringing my wheels round to correct it. Now at some point the car is going to regain grip, and when it regains grip it's going to go in the direction you've pointed the steering wheel. So you'll notice then I've relatively slowly put the corrective lock on, but then when it comes to taking it off, we get it off as quickly as we possibly can, because otherwise it's going to go over there. It's going to go off in the direction that we've pointed the steering wheel. Most people who lose control of a car in an oversteer situation catch it the first time, they catch the first slide, but then they keep the corrective lock on for too long, and then the car goes the other way. And if it goes the other way, it'll very quickly spin in the opposite direction, and there's nothing you can do about that. So your biggest and your best chance of catching an unexpected oversteer situation is to catch it in the first instance. That secondary skid will get you if you're not careful. It'll get the best of us, that. So again, watch how quickly I take the corrective lock off once I've got control. Off. Really pull the steering wheel around and regain control. And that way we've got the car back in a straight line, and it's not going to catch us with a secondary skid. But what about stability control? Again, I'm a huge advocate of stability control. You saw in the last video what a difference it made when the car was understeering. What does it do when the car's oversteering? Well, a lot of the time it literally stops the car from oversteering in the first place. I'm going to switch it back on now. Settings wise, I've got the car in automatic just because it makes it easier for me. I've got the throttle setting in the most sensitive, Sport Plus, so I'm not having to press the gas much to induce wheel spin at the rear axle. But now I've got the stability control on, so let's see what happens. Let's see what happens this time when we get into that oversteer situation. So here we go. I'm going to turn right. I'm doing everything exactly the same as I did last time. Look at that. So stability control is it's a really sophisticated system. It's got a range of sensors around the car. It's measuring each individual wheel speed. It's measuring the angle of the steering wheel and the rate at which I'm putting steering into the car. It's recognising how much or how little I'm pressing the accelerator. It's measuring the yaw of the car, which is that rotational movement, and vertical damper, all these different parameters that it's measuring, and it's doing them in thousandths of a second, and it's recognising right at the very start of that skid that the car is starting to oversteer. So if the car is oversteering, I'm steering right like this, and the back end of the car starts to come round to the left, the car will cut the gas and it will apply the brakes on the inside right wheel, just on one wheel. So there's a range of control that the car's got that I haven't got, and I can feel it doing it. So when we do that, we'll do that little oversteer exercise again, but we'll do it with the stability control switched on, and I can feel the brakes just pulling that. If you imagine that as the car's sliding round to the right, just applying that inside rear brake stops the skid from developing. You can feel it, can't you? You can feel the car just straightening itself up. I'm not doing anything different there than I was before with the stability control system switched off. So let's do it again. I'm going to turn right. We induce some oversteer, and yes, the car slides a little bit. You can feel it moving sideways, but immediately the brakes are coming on, and you can feel the car steering itself from the rear axle. It wants to go. You can feel it, can't you? It wants to go sideways, but it's fighting against the systems, and the systems are pulling it back. And I can see that the revs are lower, the rear wheels aren't spinning up. There's nothing ridiculous happening at the rear end. It really does feel fantastically under control, really different from without the systems on. So remember, this isn't about drifting the car. This isn't about showing off and sliding the car around and drifting and doing all that fancy stuff that you see on other parts of YouTube. This is about keeping control of the car in an emergency. If you've ended up in a skid on the road accidentally, it's an emergency and you need to do something about it. So let's lose speed, let's get the car slowed down or even stopped as soon as we can do, and let these systems sort you out. Because they are really good, and they're better than me. They're better than me at this. Oversteer, bring it to a stop. Brilliant. I'm a huge advocate of these stability control systems, but we can still switch them off, and we can still do a little bit of drifting, can't we? It'd be rude not to while we were here on an old abandoned airfield with permission. We haven't just broken in. It would be rude, wouldn't it, not to do a little bit of this. Comes round quick, doesn't it? Anyway, there you go, oversteer. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give us a thumbs up. And go and have a look at the website as well, reglocal.com. There's loads more information there about advanced and performance driving. information about the books that I've written that are available on Amazon, and also how you can get a day's advanced driver or rider coaching with me. If you fancy a day out, drop me an email, we'll sort something out. But for now, thanks very much for watching. Hope you've enjoyed the video. We'll see you next time.